So thanks so much for joining us tonight for Nurturing Difference, Parenting and Disability in a Careless Age. This event is in person, and we also have a live stream. For captions in person, as I said a moment ago, you can see them right there, and the captioning is provided by, Noah, you'll love this, Total Recall. In addition, we have ASL translation provided by team partners in communication, Susie and Amberly over there. Thank you so much for that. My name is Pranav Anand, and I serve as Faculty Director of the Humanities Institute, or THI, a research and public programming arm of the Humanities Division. THI is a center for bold projects in the humanities, and today we're here because of one of those bold projects, abolition medicine and disability justice. This project, based at UC Irvine, is supported by a UC multi-campus research programs and initiative grant that networks health humanities scholars across 5 UC campuses. Our campus's PI on this project is Megan Moodie in the dress. Also, in addition to it being in the dress, a professor of anthropology. And THI serves as the administrative home for the project here. This MRPI grant is an exciting and profound example of the unique power of the UC as a whole to support vital, novel research and pedagogy that a single campus could not. And on behalf of all of us, I want to thank the MRPI program for its support. This year, THI's theme is nourishment. Beyond sustenance, we see nourishment as a call to joy, beauty, and connection. This event, which celebrates 2 luminous books by 2 of our own, Danilyn Rutherford, once a slug, always a slug, and Noah Wardrip-Fruin, such a slug that he lives on right up the road on campus, might seem at first blush like odd choices for nourishment. But both of these works aim straight at some of the most important aspects of the nature of human connection that brings us such meaning, at ability and self-sovereignty, at communication and communion, at fear and love. And such is their writerly power that they accomplish the magic act that narrative text seems so mysteriously able to achieve, bringing us into their lives, embodied and whole. Watching the birds whirl, feeling the butterflies on our fingers, hearing Millie croon, building our museum together. Words made flesh. I was told to be brief, so I really am brief, so that you all can talk. I could say more, but I'm gonna have them talk. So with that, I'd like to welcome the PI of this project and the person who came up with this, Megan Moodie, to the stage. Thanks, Megan.
One day in 2017, when my son Toma was 7, we were sitting together on the couch. In a few days, I'd have the 3rd in a series of surgeries required to repair the soft tissue around my left hip joint. Toma was learning to tell time by wearing an analog watch on his left wrist and a digital watch on his right wrist so he could check and make sure he was reading the little hand and the big hand correctly. Here's how our conversation went. Him, I'm so sorry your hip is broken, Mama. Me, I know, Bug, but the surgery, there's a really good chance that him, not 100%, but maybe 99.9% chance. Me, well, maybe more like 80%. Him, 80% means 20% is like not so good. Me, yes, but 80% is also a very big chance I'll be a lot more normal and we'll go hiking every weekend. Him, I know. Me. We just have to be prepared for the reality, and we can't get heartbroken. Things might not change. Him. But they might. Me. They might. I think they will. I found this conversation written verbatim years later in an old journal. What amazes me about it now is not just how clever and charming my kiddo was at that age, and of course he's still clever and charming as a teenager, but the fact of its existence at all. I'll be honest, I'm not sure if I had been able to lead the able-bodied life for which I had prepared prior to becoming disabled in middle age at precisely the moment when I also became a mother. I would have taken the time to faithfully record this conversation with my son. I know that I spent a lot of that era feeling like a failure of a mom, someone who couldn't run on the beach and sit on the floor playing Legos for hours on end. With the benefit of hindsight, I see a form of attention, a relationship that grew between me and my kid because I wasn't a runaround soccer mom. Disability enabled discussion, elaboration, and humor. It built worlds, as both authors featured here tonight show in their new books. We are here because 3 years ago, the Office of the President of the University of California funded a multi-campus research project initiative, MRPI, the worst acronym in history, no offense, UCOP, in abolition medicine and disability justice that has sought to map where concerns about medical violence, incarceration, and health inequality overlap with movements for disability justice. If disability justice is a new or a newish concept for you, I'd summarize it really briefly as the insistence on the inherent value of the vast variation of human body minds, the demand to embrace care and interdependence as our guiding values, and the practice of centering disabled voices in conversations about disability. Helmed by Professor Juliet McMullen, an anthropologist at UC Irvine's Medical School, and involving faculty from 5 UCs, this team has mobilized an unprecedented set of methodologies, from ethnography to archival excavation, to build a concentric vision of health inequality on our campuses, in our communities, and in the state of California. Also, and importantly, our team has looked at where and how people are trying to fill the gaps, including ourselves. Where do we find care? Are other worlds, worlds that might better facilitate connection and healing, being built? For me, obviously, this work is very personal. The smallest concentric circle starts with my couch, trying to find ways to be a scholar and a mom. I could have used Beautiful Mystery and Animal Crossing's New Horizons in those days. I needed something better, the equivalent of a digital watch to measure my analog wishes against. Wishes for community in which I and people like me and people totally different from me could be included and even valued. This event is kind of dream fulfillment, then, through the support of THI here at UCSC and the UC-wide Humanities Center at UC Irvine. I want to give them a shout out. And most recently, the Abolition Medicine and Disability Justice Group. We have arrived at an evening and a celebration of 2 books in which disability is not deficit, but world building. These are worlds not only of loss and tragedy, but of tremendous gain, creativity, and joy. To start, I also want to thank Irina Polic, Pranav Anand, and especially Jessica Guild. Thank you, Jessica, who lovingly planned all of the access features that make this evening special and different here at UC Santa Cruz. Thank you to our ASL interpreters, our videographer, and our audio team, and to those of you who are watching on the live stream. We see you. And now I'm going to introduce our first set of comments, talks. I'm going to introduce Danilyn Rutherford and her book, and at the same time I will introduce Donna Haraway, who's going to comment on Danilyn's book, just so that we get this out of the way and we get ripping. Okay, so Danilyn Rutherford received her bachelor's degree from Stanford and doctorate in anthropology from Cornell in 1997. She served on the faculty of the University of Chicago from 1998 to 2009, when she joined the faculty here at UC Santa Cruz. In July of 2017, Danilyn became president of the Wenner-Gren Foundation in New York, which is the primary and premier funder of work in the field of anthropology. Danilyn is a past president of the Society for Cultural Anthropology and has served on numerous boards and executive committees. Her work has been published in every single major anthropology journal that there is, and she's also a member of the Institute for Advanced Studies. Danilyn is the author of 3 books on West Papua, Indonesia, where she conducted the bulk of her research on an enormous range of topics. It's staggering, from kinship, Christian conversion, nationalism, missionary language, ideology, money, technology, so many topics. In 2016, Danilyn received a National Science Foundation Scholars Award to begin a new project on belief and communication in the social world of adolescents with profound intellectual disabilities. Her ethnographic memoir that we celebrate tonight, Beautiful Mystery, Living in a Wordless World, is the product of that fellowship and was published by Duke University Press in 2025. Comments will be also shared by Donna Haraway, who's Distinguished Professor Emerita in the History of Consciousness and Feminist Studies departments at the University of California, Santa Cruz. She taught at the University of Hawaii and Johns Hopkins before arriving here in 1980, where she has influenced generations of scholars in feminist science and technology studies. It's literally impossible to do justice to Donna's stature and contribution to the intellectual lives of so many of us. But a few highlights include 2002, when she was awarded the J.D. Bernal Prize, the highest honor given by the Society for Social Studies of Science for lifetime contributions to the field. 2017, when Donna was awarded the Wilbur Cross Medal, one of the highest honors for alumni of Yale University. And recently, 2025, she was awarded the incredibly prestigious Erasmus Prize, which recognizes contributions to European culture and thought overall, like all of Europe. Haraway is an altruist, this is from the committee for the Erasmus Prize. I quote them. Haraway is an altruistic thinker who explores the many interconnections between biology, literature, art, and social and political engagement. She challenges human thought patterns and behaviors that go against humanistic ideals like equality and openness. What sets Haraway apart is that she extends her thinking beyond humans to include all living things. On a personal note, Danilyn was the chair of anthropology here who oversaw my promotion to tenure. And Donna was my professor when I was a graduate student here at UCSC. So to share a stage with them is a profound honor. And with that, I hand it over to Danilyn.
Let me just say, Megan, it was a really good decision. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's so nice to be back on campus. I used to live up the road too. And I'm so grateful to everyone at the Humanities Institute, to Megan Moodie for championing this event and appearing at it, and to Donna for being up for this conversation, and finally to Noah for such a lovely and illuminating book. It's such an honor to share a stage with you all. My stepdaughter has this theory of the dessert stomach. Your dinner stomach may be full, but your dessert stomach always has room. As anthropologists, I think we have anthropology stomachs. These stomachs keep digesting 24/7, whether we like it or not. So even though my daughter's early years were tumultuous, they were also instructive. This book is an attempt to put my methodological cards on the table to show how anthropology and life infiltrate each other, how life conditions thought and thought shapes life. Its initial ingredients were 2 sets of texts, academic papers that my daughter kept sneaking into, and memoiristic writing that I initially did just for fun. It was hard to turn this into a book, and I'd be happy to talk about that when we have time for questions. But for now, I want to read from it, so I'm going to share with you part of the prologue and a passage from the introduction. If you look at the right time, you can see them, improbable flashes of neon green flitting from tree to tree. Craig discovered them as soon as we moved in, less than a month after our daughter, Millie, was born. Feral parakeets. I was in Millie's room assembling the changing table when Craig called me up to our roof deck to look. Right there, I squinted at the patch of sky between 2 trees. The swarm of dots looked black until the flock wheeled and the green feathers caught the sun. We have to show Ralph. Later that day, while Millie was napping, the three of us climbed up to look. Perched in his father's arms, Ralph stabbed his chubby finger at the horizon. Some say they're descended from escaped pets that somehow found each other, these monk parakeets that live in the treetops. Others say a flock was released when a deal in the exotic animal trade went bad. Chicago isn't the most welcoming environment for these tropical exiles, but they've made it their home, breeding in the wild here for nearly 40 years. That fall, the birds were bright against the sky. I watch for them with each changing season. In July, when the trees explode with new growth, you're less likely to see them than to hear them. A lone screech pierces the morning birdsong. Trills, cackles, and squawks mark sundown. In the winter, you'll see their dwellings, bundles of brown leaves suspended where the bare branches reach for the sky. Nestled beak to tail feathers, that's how I always pictured them, warming each other and waiting for spring. After Craig died, I was the one who took Ralph to the roof deck. Every April, we scanned the treetops and listened for their voices. In January and February, we surveyed the nests for signs of life. At the beginning of the summer, my mother drove down from Wisconsin with flats of marigolds and morning glories, and she squeezed in next to us and searched the sky. Did I ever take Millie to see the parakeets? Probably not. On that first day, she was a newborn, a soft little ball curled up in her crib. By the end of our time in Chicago, she was almost too heavy to carry up the stairs. But even then, she still couldn't follow my gaze. She wouldn't have noticed what I was looking at. I was a widow by the time Millie got her first wheelchair. I was also a newly tenured professor. My daughter, who is now an adult, does not walk on her own or speak or communicate with signs or symbols. Millie was 3 and her brother was 6 when her father died suddenly of a heart attack. I was 2 weeks away from learning whether my promotion had gone through. When the monk parakeets soared among the treetops, I longed for Millie to see them. I wanted her to experience this flash of wonder. Her disability felt tragic. I mourned all the things we might never share. Now I wonder whether I had it backwards. Maybe Millie was the flash of wonder, and I was the one who couldn't see. Across the gulf between our species, I watched the monk parakeets and pondered the mystery of their existence. My own daughter has proven as fascinating to me, as much a stranger to the landscapes I used to take for granted. Millie has brought me into a world that stretches much further than the one I once thought of as my own. It's November 2023, and I catch sight of Millie when I reach the foot of the stairs. She's sitting in a high-back chair, and she's rocking back and forth, head down, intent on her work. Her work is a salmon-colored crocheted octopus, a gift from her care provider, Julie, who has a sharp sense of Millie's obsessions. The octopus has tentacles, obviously, and Millie is holding them in her field of vision, moving her head back and forth to shift her angle on these alluring shapes. Every so often, she brings a tentacle to her mouth and brushes it gently across her lips. Millie is wearing a cotton hoodie and leggings under her orthotics, plastic sheaths that run from her knees to her feet, where they are squeezed into shoes designed to be worn with them. Millie is long-limbed and built like an athlete, a 5-foot-tall version of me. I clomp around the house and knock things off counters. When she's gliding in her wheelchair, Millie is ethereal, not an ogre, but a sprite. Her hair, which is a color midway between auburn and dirty blonde, is cut in a pixie. She looks like Julia Roberts playing Tinkerbell when she smiles. Right now, Millie is not smiling. She hasn't registered my arrival. I take a seat close to her and say her name. A beat goes by, and then another, and her face lights up. She lifts the octopus off her lap and gives it a playful shake. I study her profile. Did she recognize my voice? Is that the meaning of this pleasure? Or did a tentacle catch the sun? 6 years ago, I left the local university and started working for a New York-based foundation. I haven't been back to Santa Cruz in over a month. I want to believe Millie is happy I'm home, but I never see more than part of the picture, foothills of a mountain range barely visible above the clouds. I don't understand my daughter. What she likes to eat, what she likes to touch, what noises she prefers, I think I have a grip on this. But much of what Millie does still seems inexplicable to me, even after more than 20 years of living together. Millie hums, and I assume she's happy. She cracks up, and I tell myself she thinks I'm hilarious. But then her humming turns sour, and her laughter spins out of control, and I'm faced with the possibility that she's actually in distress. And yet, the mystery Millie is to me has pulled me close to her. It has also made me wonder whether I have ever truly understood any of the other people I have loved. Thank you.
First, I have to say that reading Beautiful Mystery was a very moving and touching experience. I read it because I had to, because the deadline was coming up, and because Danilyn's my friend. But I read it with intense interest and pleasure that I urge you to take on. You won't regret a second of it. She enriches my ignorance. For Danilyn, in honor of Millie, her daughter, who defies diagnosis, and in honor of Kevin, my nephew, who lived with Down syndrome. First, becoming with, being with, reciprocal inductions. I am interested especially in two human persons in this comment tonight, Millie and Danilyn, and so I won't spend a lot of time on dogs, rivers, or octopus toys. But on second thought, I will have to pay attention to tentacular entities, living and not, like dangly scarves, fuzzy stuffed octopuses, alluring shoelaces, dog or human heads or tails with irresistible hair or fur, and caressing fingers. Such filamentous thingies turn out to be the connective tissue of touching, a bit like mycorrhizal networks of the Wood Wide Web. Touching such thready tissue is a process name for becoming with in Millie's story and Millie Danilyn's story. Millie and Millie Danilyn, it's connected by a hyphen, are not the same sort of person. Their relationalities, their worlding processes, which bring them into presence and being, are various and different. Surfaces, not inaccessible interiors, are the powers in this story. Surfaces are attractive, tasty, scary, slimy, disgusting, shiny, miraculous. Eyes and eye contact, much less words and symbols, are not of much interest in this story for making relational persons. Thready things connect persons here. As you can see, I'm much more interested in persons than in humans. Millie and Danilyn's are persons together, whatever or whoever else they might also be. Persons are necessarily webbed with partners in the dance of becoming with, but not necessarily linked with normal human beings. That is, cognitively dominant, linguistically saturated, corporeally ignorant individuals, or even with living entities. Objects relations, Pache the psychologist, make persons too. The question is not, what is a human being? Frankly, defining what is human is reductively obvious. Let's just say a human being is a card-carrying member of Homo sapiens sapiens, tested by genetic heritage, genealogy, microbiome types, proteins, etc. Let's just be biological reductionists here and realize how truly uninteresting this question for encountering Millie and Millie Danilyn is. Crucially, the category of human tells us almost nothing interesting or transformative about the process called person. Persons do not precede relatings. Persons are delicately stilled and always dancing knots of relating. They are not items in categories. Persons are always emerging, composing, decomposing, recomposing beings, becomings in what Karen Barad called interaction. There should be a word that does not separate being, becoming, moving, stilling. Categories and definitions don't do much work in this book, whether they be possible genetic or neurological diagnoses, definitions of what is human, or boxes to check for meeting developmental goals, or more likely, not meeting developmental goals. Rather, the burning question that singes all the pages of this book is, how do persons bring each other into being and into co-presence? Persons make each other. They reciprocally induce each other. But how? Part 2. Danilyn asks Millie, who are you, and so what are we? How can Danilyn, mother, caretaker, companion, strange object, conservator, advocate, guardian dog, and more, all at the same time, come to know, to recognize her daughter? That person, that bundle of relatings, who remakes her constantly and sometimes, maybe even oftentimes, painfully, but always without words. First, let's rule out the wrong answers. Danilyn cannot come to know who, what Millie is by projecting herself inside her daughter and thus knowing her world from a fabulated interior, from, quote, the other's point of view. Of course, fantasies aside, we can't do that with anyone. Such forbidden habitation of the supposedly real being of another is the stuff of science fiction and bad philosophy. Getting to have an individual interior characterized by developmental achievements is a problematic cultural historical event anyhow. Danilyn cannot kidnap her daughter's insides and lay them out for examination. Millie is home. She is without doubt relationally here. Call that personhood. But that does not depend on having an inside in the modernizing Western sense. Millie is home. She doesn't have a body home in which she lives, available to someone clever enough to climb in there and look around. Neither interlocked eyes nor exchanged words will work. Those theologized windows onto the soul, those fabulous tools for chiseling through the walls of the defended other, fail utterly with Millie's wandering eye and wordless sounds. Even in a mother's fantasy, words and staring into each other's eyes fail. Danilyn has to encounter, not inhabit, Millie in relation that remakes Danilyn and Millie. That's one word. Millie in relation that remakes Danilyn and Millie in the process. Conventionally, one might say Danilyn has to come to know Millie by somehow becoming present to Millie's world while letting go of preconceptions about what a world is. But Danilyn can't do that by talking with her daughter or spying on her supposed insides in any other normal way. Unnorming rather than understanding is the labor at hand. What Danilyn must do is accompany Millie. She must be in company with, company to, companion to, cum panis, with bread, baking bread. In the book, accompanying is an excruciatingly intimate, sometimes disgusting, sometimes exhilarating process of being alongside, being in touch, literally, coming home, body to body, in all the dailiness of care and caring that feminists learn to theorize. Sometimes accompanying must feel like tagging along juggling with a veritable army of fellow caregivers, all the stuff needed to get a permanent stranger who is my daughter through the day. Sometimes accompanying must feel like coming home to a beautiful mystery. Who are you, and so who are we? You are home. We are at home to each other. We are in company. We are home. Ursula Le Guin might say, we are always coming home. 3, it turns out I'm going to have to talk about dogs after all. How else can one open up to not knowing? That is, to some state, roughly Buddhist in aspiration, that empties out enough to allow accompanying, to touching wordlessly in permanent, mundane, daily mystery. I titled my comment, "She Enriches My Ignorance." I learned that phrase from Ian Wheaty, that New Zealand poet, art critic, and fellow dog companion, as he described what it was like to go for a walk with his dog, his actual dog, not with some humanist projection of a fur-clad being with an interior like Ian's if he could only climb inside and look. This was not a walk full of commands to heel, look at me, wait, walk on, etc. It was not a demonstration of dog school successfully navigated, and so of a human owner who looked entirely sane, that is, in control, to any fully human outsider. It was not a walk characterized by conversation with both parts taken by Ian. No, this was a scent walk along odd to the human paths and toward odd to the human posts, blades of grass, and other objects that were of intense interest to the dog, not to Ian, or at least not to Ian without dog. That's one word. Ian's dog cared about scenting and about particular scents that Ian couldn't smell anyway. The dog did not care about Ian. The dog had a world to be getting on with. So Ian had to slow down, notice the unnoticeable, and become otherwise if he were to accompany his dog respectfully, not knowingly. After all, she enriched his ignorance, not his understanding. This was the condition of being in company, of accompanying and not inhabiting the other. Ian also was, of course, responsible for keeping the dog from getting run over in an urban street. For that, a little dog and human obedience training can be useful, also probably a leash. I know all of the equipment is obvious. Never mind, you know that, that's obvious. Okay, I know something about all this too because my dog Shindachu and I went on a scent walk this morning on Santa Cruz city streets. She was excited at the door before we left, not because she was going out with me. She was excited to be going out sniffing, or so I think I know. I don't have Millie in my life. I do make home with Shindachu in permanent mystery. This morning, because we were in company, she made her delights mine. In the waft of an odor and in the flick of a moment, we became Shindachu Donna. She didn't care. I did. I definitely did not look sane to anyone, least of all myself. The privilege of such being with, becoming with, is impossible to describe. It is a beautiful mystery. The labor and sometimes desolation of learning that kind of ignorance, even with a dog person, much less with a human person, with Millie, must not be underestimated. Reading Beautiful Mystery shows on every page how difficult it often has been for Danilyn to let herself not know, not need to know, in order to become with Millie, to be with Millie, to accompany Millie. Emptying out of categories, certainties, goals, even for an hour, is the fruit of a lifetime of learning how to let beloved companions enrich one's ignorance. Thank you.
Thank you, Danilyn and Donna. And I learned that I was doing notes and they both have D, and that was very, very problematic. So thank you, Megan, for pairing them. My note-taking abbreviations failed. So now for the second part, I'm going to introduce Noah and Megan, and then Noah will come up, and then Megan. It's a form of repeat without repetition of what we just saw. Noah Wardrip-Fruin is a professor of computational media here at UC Santa Cruz, where he and Michael Matias co-direct the Expressive Intelligence Studio, a technical and cultural research group. We're here tonight to celebrate Noah's most recent book, Animal Crossing: New Horizons, Can a Game Take Care of Us? Also, can a title have two colons, apparently, published by University of Chicago Press. Noah's research is concerned with electronic literature, video games, and new media. His collaborative art projects have been exhibited by the Whitney, the New Museum of Contemporary Art, and the Krannert Art Museum, among others. He's the author of 6 previous books on games and digital media, all published with MIT Press. That begins with The New Media Reader in 2003, a multimedia archive of new media sources he compiled with Nick Munfort, and a triptych of works on new and old media with Pat Harrington first person in 2004, second person in 2007, third person in 2009. His 2009 book, Expressive Processing, marked a watershed moment in software studies. Indeed, it's the first book in the MIT Press series, Software Studies. At the core of the book is a commitment to examining how the processing of a piece of new media impacts the effective potential of the player, what Noah calls expression. In this way, he moves from the low-level specifications of the code up to the level of interaction with a person, pointing towards a technically informed media analysis like we saw emerge for film in the 20th century. His 2020 book, How Pac-Man Eats, follows up on this in what seems to me a very linguistic way. I really think this is true. That's why I enjoyed this book a lot. Because I only read linguistics books, apparently. Pushing aside the artistic dimensions of games entirely, which is very controversial, Noah examines the operational logics, that's a term from Osborne, what you could call the syntax of how, for example, sprites interact in a game, and how that leads to the semantics communicated to the user as part of a playable model, an abstracted model of some kind of world. Noah's interested in this book in a real literary analysis of convention, how innovation in operational logics and playable models occur. One of the main critiques in the book is that while video games have innovated with abandon in spatial logics, there remains a real paucity of work on the logics of human experience and human interaction. Pandemic gaming aside, it should not surprise us that his latest book dissects one of the most celebrated game franchises that's claimed to value interpersonal interaction. But what did surprise me about this book, and what I hope we'll have a chance to discuss, is the book's operational logic, which temporizes and embodies Noah's argument in a memoir, charting his chronology playing the game with his children, Zoe and Max, during the COVID lockdown, his emotional response, the arc of it over time, and how he came to understand the game, alongside his own relationship to disability and parenthood. Megan Moodie is a professor of anthropology whose research and teaching bring together social science research methods and the arts. She's an affiliated member in film and digital media, global community health, and legal studies. She is also chair of the Disabled Faculty Networking Group. An interdisciplinary writer, artist, and feminist scholar, Megan works in a variety of mediums, from lyrical essay to film and dance to academic research. Her first book, We Were Adivasis, published in 2015 by University of Chicago, is an ethnography that discusses gender injustice in indigenous communities in India. Her essay, Birthright, published in Chicago Quarterly Review, about her diagnosis with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome at age 40, was named a notable essay of the year by Best American Essays in 2019. She was also longlisted for the Craft Journal Creative Nonfiction Prize in 2021. Megan is the subject of an ongoing documentary film project about her life and dance called Inventory of Joy, created with collaborator Professor Cynthia Ling Lee, who's a professor in performance play and design and theater arts. A clip of that documentary recently went viral online, and I can't wait to see the completed film because I just keep hitting refresh. So with that, Noah, I would like to invite you to the stage. Thank you.
So I want to thank Pranav and, of course, Megan, Danilyn, and Donna, and the folks at THI and more that I probably don't have time to go into. As was alluded, this is a book about playing a game called Animal Crossing. How many people here have heard of it? Okay, some, yeah. So we were playing this, me and my kids, during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic. You might wonder why I was playing video games with my kids at all. Part of it is that games are an increasingly important part of how people understand the world. When I teach undergraduates, the ones I teach, play games more than they watch television, play games more than they read books. It's a central media form for how they come to understand themselves and the world. But also, video games are one of the few ways that I can play with my kids. So the game is connected to my experience as a father in the book. What I didn't know until later, and I'm going to read a little excerpt about, is that the initial design of Animal Crossing games came from a father looking for a way to connect with his kids. A father creating a game in part as a form of atonement, as a form of apology for not being more present in their lives. As soon as I began to research the Animal Crossing series, I started finding versions of this story, and it made sense to me. I had started playing New Horizons with my kids because I couldn't be the kind of father I wanted to be. During the COVID-19 lockdown, I don't think anyone could be, but for me, it wasn't just the lockdown. Yes, the lockdown meant we couldn't take our kids for a walk to a park, but at that point, I hadn't been up to taking a walk for years. I couldn't stand up long enough to play catch. I certainly couldn't jump and duck along with the Go Noodle videos we used to try to encourage the kids to exercise inside. I can understand a need for atonement. I can understand grief that you can't be the parent you want to be. I feel it particularly with Max. When Zoe was young, if she was feeling fussy, I could scoop her into my arms and walk out into the redwoods. I'd support her head as she leaned back, taking in the patterns and colors of the light filtering through the forest, the branches waving in the breeze. She'd breathe in the air, rich with damp earth and redwood duff, and would almost always calm down. When Max was the same age, I spent half a year just sitting in a reclining chair that Jen had lugged into our main room for me, so I could be with the family. Sometimes I had energy to read. Jen would bring Max over to lie on me. I'd unbutton my shirt so his face could rest against the skin of my chest. But if he got fussy, I didn't have it in me to even sway him in place. Unless sucking on my finger calmed him, he'd just cry until Jen could take him away again. So, years later, playing Animal Crossing together created a new kind of space in which new things were possible with my kids. 2021 was the first year I played tag with Max. He was 6. Before then, we'd been able to play a little hide and seek when I was feeling up to it. I'd walk slowly around the room saying, "Where's Max? Where's Max?" And then a pause. "Is he under the table?" And I'd lift up the tablecloth, pretending to peer underneath, while he giggled from behind the couch. But Max was a ball of energy. There was no way to even pretend we were playing tag. At my best, I couldn't move fast enough to pursue him dramatically, and he would never have any trouble catching me. Until, as you might have guessed, we tried it in Animal Crossing. Researching this book, I realized my big blind spot was the online experience. So I paid Nintendo for a year's subscription to the service of no longer blocking internet connections between our devices. I thought I'd be using it for touring the islands of strangers through the dreams made available via a special bed. I thought I'd investigate online item trading and purchases. I thought I'd visit the ACNH homes of colleagues and friends. I did some of all those things, but the amount I did them was dwarfed by the hours I spent playing with Max, him on one Switch and me on the other. It was an utterly different experience from the hobbled multiplayer on a single Switch. Neither of us had to be the leader. We could just do things together as equals. The game encouraged us by granting miles for visiting and being visited. We started out low-key. Herschel, my research character, would come over to the main family island, or Max's character would come over to mine. We'd wander around the island, fish together, each able to keep what we caught, and play house in our homes, eventually lying down together for the pretend night. In time, we got more rambunctious. We would run around playing tag and follow the leader, narrowly skirting the flower beds. He'd run laps around resident services, then suddenly head off toward another area of the island. I'd have a hint that he was about to climb a cliff or jump a stream because I'd see a ladder or vaulting pole appear in his character's grip. He'd zig and I'd take a risk on zagging, opening or closing the distance between us. The game kept our running speed the same. I might tire out mentally, but I sure lasted longer than I would have physically. I became thankful for the weird viewpoint restrictions in ACNH because they let us play hide and seek. With no camera rotation, the other player was sure to be seeing the world from the same angle as you, so you could stop behind a tree barely visible and listen for their footsteps as they came near your hiding place. With no way to see the world from overhead, neither of you could get the advantage of a bird's eye view. Even if I was exhausted and lying in bed, unable to face playing in person, I could usually muster up the energy for a little online New Horizons play with Max downstairs. Even if I was wearing pajamas every day in the real world, Max could take me shopping in the game and then pick out outfits he wanted me to wear. Even if I couldn't make him snack in the real world, I could plant money trees he could come and harvest, and I could send him gifts through the airport's mail service. He learned to type phrases like, "Hi, Dad," so he could write back to me. These were precious experiences to me, and I think for Max too. I remember Jen saying, this game is letting him do the things with you that he so desperately wants to do. At the same time as Animal Crossing allows such open-ended play, however, the game is also highly manipulative in encouraging other types of play that embed patriarchal subordination to a giant raccoon dog, types of play that normalize hyper-financialization and neoliberal values. My feelings about the game ended up complex rather than simply celebratory. I want to resist some of the ways ACNH tries to take care of us while treasuring my experiences with the others. Thank you.
I'm taking my time so I can collect myself just a little bit. So I had the great pleasure of being able to read Noah Wardrip-Fruin's Animal Crossing New Horizons, Can a Game Take Care of Us? In draft form. And I have looked forward to its arrival with great anticipation. This book is a stunning achievement. If I'm being honest, many attempts at what are known in the publishing biz as crossover books, that is, books based on academic research but written for an audience that includes but extends beyond academia, they kind of fall flat. The authors are uncertain about who they're writing for, or they don't attend enough to the craft of writing, and so the texts can end up being kind of neither this nor that. They're not always great reads. It's rare that a book is rich in detail, theoretically astute, emotionally impactful, and a page-turner worthy of the mystery bestseller list. And that's not an exaggeration. It is a super page-turner. That's exactly what Animal Crossing New Horizons is, and from now on, I'm just going to call it New Horizons. So if you haven't read New Horizons, it tracks Noah's experience playing the smash hit video game Animal Crossing with his children during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, while also homeschooling and grappling with his own health struggles. While not self-described as an ethnography, anthropologists could learn a lot from this book. New Horizons takes a deeply ethnographic approach to the telling of the story of how Noah, Zoe, and Max arrive on Nook Inc.'s island, encounter the characters and game parameters it sets out, and within that predefined space, begin to craft a shared world of their own. Noah convincingly shows that while Animal Crossing is one of the life simulation genre of video games that includes SimCity and Civilization, it's also a progression game in which one is working towards specific ends, namely the construction of an increasingly developed island that is also entirely safe. Unlike lots of other progress games, in Animal Crossing, you can't really go bankrupt or get sent back to the beginning or have your entire civilization wiped out by invaders. If you try to do something the game doesn't want you to do, it just doesn't let you. And if you neglect an activity that it wants you to undertake, it just won't let you do other things until you complete those activities, like chores. Noah describes Animal Crossing then as a paternal game. On one hand, it requires subordination to pre-extant rules of work, collection, and progress. On the other hand, in adhering to these rules, nothing can ever go wrong. In exchange for subsuming one's desires, one receives protection and safety. But as Noah's reading captured for us, there's a catch to this story, because while in the virtual world of Nook Island, Noah and his kids' characters may be able to run and dig and pole vault rivers, Noah also describes how, IRL, he was coming to terms with limitations imposed by increasing disability. I don't remember ever reading such a frank and moving discussion of what it's like to be a disabled parent, especially that experience during the early days of pandemic shelter in place. And I certainly had never read one that spoke specifically to the experience of fatherhood and disability. I'll confess that up to the point of reading the New Horizons manuscript and then later the work of Jan Gru, who visited THI from Norway last year to talk about his memoir, I Live a Life Like Yours, I had been pretty myopically focused on parents and identifying as mothers or primary caretakers. I had never stopped to consider how social expectations to provide financially, provide safety, provide self-assured guidance through unexpected difficulties like global pandemics would mean perhaps a different set of struggles as a parent. There were forms of grief I recognized, such as cataloging all the physical things that one cannot do, and there were others that were less familiar or less acute. In this sense, in his characteristically modest but sincere and brilliant way, Noah's new book is making an essential contribution both to disabled parents living with the realities of our dangerous and careless age, who will see their lives reflected in its pages, but also to a general public that might not think much about the challenges faced by disabled parents. Most folks seeing the title of our event tonight probably assumed that we would have parents of children with disabilities speaking. It's sort of rare. In fact, I can't name another event that I've ever been to that really talked explicitly about the experience of disabled parenting. One of my favorite parts of the book is when Noah describes creating a character named Leighton, whose physical limitations mirror Noah's own. Leighton can't wheel a shovel or a pole vault, but he can collect shells on the beach sometimes, and from bed, he can craft his space, design meaningful clothing and wall coverings, and discover the ritualistic pleasure of daily repetitions. He can visit other islands in dreams, along with fellow players like Max, and Noah learned lots of other disabled players around the world had discovered the same pleasures in Animal Crossing. I can't wait to teach and write about this book. It's impossible to think now about its insights without including in the frame the realities of toxic masculinity and of paternalism gone terribly, terribly, terribly awry in the frame. We who are raising young people who identify as boys and someday men need new possibilities, new models, new ways of being in the world, and there are sadly very few places to turn to look for models to talk about masculinity. New Horizons is one such place. Toma, I really think you need to read this book. Thank you. We are going to open up the conversation for questions. We can, any of the panelists, and we will be moderated by our friend Pranav. Onward.
Okay. So the impossible happened, which is that we are 10 minutes early. Which means that, Megan, you put the fear of God in us, that we all were exactly on time. So that means that, it's great that all of you talked individually, but I wonder if I could ask some of you to comment. Maybe I could start with Danilyn and Noah. Do you want to talk about each other's books?
Sure, I guess. Is this on?
Yep.
Okay. I love your book so much, Noah. And I have to confess, I can't say I've never played a video game. I played Space Invaders in a bar in like 1986, maybe? But basically, now I feel like I have. It's just the writing is so incredible. I was right there. I kind of reread parts of it last night. I was like, this is so great. And I love the way in which it's just so uncertain. It's like, I'm going to tell you how I came to love this, hate this, love this. And it almost made me think of like Lauren Berlant's idea of cruel optimism. And is this kind of like that turned inside out? There's this bizarre kind of kind pessimism here. Like you show us all the things that are super problematic about like entering a world and discovering, first of all, you're incredibly indebted and have to do a mess of gig work in order to get out, But then there's this sort of fact you can't really lose. You can't end up homeless in this world. You can't lose your house, you can't lose your children to Child Protective Services. There's this really interesting kind of turn within the book and also turn in your relationship to it that I just thought was really beautiful. And anyway, I don't think there's a question in there, but I just did want to say that. Yeah.
Yes, so I said to you earlier that I really found your book moving, and I think it's, a deeply written book. It was the first time I'd considered what sociality might be without symbol usage, and that's continued to stay with me as a running thing that I've talked about with my students and other people since reading it. And of course, it's also a profound meditation on parenthood. And I guess I feel honored to be up here and able to say what a joy I found it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, well, that was very kumbaya. So, Donna, what do you think? Do you want to say something?
Yeah, my nephew, which I named very briefly in the introduction to the talk, lived with Down syndrome. And I was thinking, of course, of Kevin and Millie reading Danilyn's book and thinking of the similarities and differences in their lives and of the longing for a diagnosis, for some way to name what was going on that would somehow ease whatever it was to become a family together, particularly a family like ours that was very achievement-oriented and very verbally adept and very athletically on and on. To all of a sudden, one of us was a person with a very unknowable future, right at the edge of the moment in time. Just a few years before, Kevin probably would have been, quote, institutionalized, a really amazing word. But he was able to stay at home and live at home and become the person and family member he became, in part because he became a member of a research project. Looking for, various. This was a period of time in which the beginning of the excitement about molecular biology might lead one to know more than you just had a trisomy 21 year. You had perhaps some kinds of specific genetic issues that might somehow, that kind of needing to know that gave comfort. And yet that knowing never worked because Kevin wasn't that person, even if he had a diagnosis that Millie never has been able to have. Should she have had? I so identified with your longing for a name, and yet also knowing that isn't what was going to make a family, and that somehow whatever it was that let Kevin's big brother ride the bump cars with him hour after hour and quarter after quarter, And, as Kevin shrieked when his brother ran into him, and even more when he ran into his brother, that kind of, Kevin who would grab the mic at any party and insist on giving a really quite endless toast. It would go on for a very long time at his brother's wedding, and Kevin had tailored for him a bespoke suit. Because as you know, kids with, adults with Down syndrome don't fit normal, so-called normal clothes. You can't buy clothes for people whose limbs are supposedly too short or too long or too something. Kevin was either not enough of this or too much of that, and on we go. And then came the time when he was living in a group home, and they wouldn't let him. His sister liked to pick him up every weekend and bring him to her lesbian steak night gatherings, and he was kind of the favorite male, really, besides my older brother, who was also allowed as an honorary lesbian. Kevin was definitely a part of steak night and would spend the night with Deborah and her wife, until the group home and the long arm of the law said you can't spend that many nights living under the same roof with your family and still qualify for being able to be in the group home. So the family has to mount this giant operation of attacking the law and of lying to the group home. So deceiving them, or really kind of being in a deception together, etc. So what struck me about many things in your book is the many kinds of things. People making a family together with a person who has unnormed the entire thing, Kevin had a diagnosis, but it didn't, And then came the time when Kevin experiences what most folks with Down syndrome continue to experience, which is early Alzheimer's, and all of the things that go with that. And when the family who couldn't take him home often enough, his sister and his brother and his mother, learned that he's being abused in the group home by someone who is taking the money from the folks from the Medicare system, and they weren't getting enough to eat. That they were the adults, not so young by that time, in the group home, all of them experiencing various forms of cognitive trouble, as well as physical trouble, were hungry. And I remember the shame the family felt, all of us, that sense of powerlessness before the law and before the institutions, and these are the institutions that you desperately need. Without the educational system that did special needs, this and that, and set, all these goals that Kevin never met, et cetera, et cetera. Without all of those things, his life would have been vastly worse. And yet we all knew how it could have been vastly better. And I felt that in your book in spades.
Danilyn, I kept thinking, but just for the audience's benefit, that I'm a third generation person with disabilities, but also a third generation disability activist. My grandmother wrote the first special education curriculum for the state of Wisconsin in the late 60s and early 70s because my Uncle Sean was born with nonverbal autism, which, speaking of biology, seems to have quite a lot to do with my special embodiment. And in a similar and related way, I know that my grandmother lived with the hope for diagnosis for Sean, who also was kept at home for as long as she lived, and her explanatory she had to have a framework, and for her it was Catholicism. For the whole family, the story that held them up was the story that God doesn't make mistakes, and that everyone is valuable, and that Sean was a miracle. She would say to me when I was young, well, Mother Mary didn't know what she was being called to either. And I still remember that, and yet I did research about my family for the book I've been working on recently. I was also wanting to, call up Grandma on the other side and say, you didn't need it was okay that you didn't know. You know, and we probably didn't need to make quite so many demands on Jesus and Mary. And yeah, it is a long distance, long temporal spatial conversation I would love to enable, because I think it augmented and produced suffering, and not to say that there's no depictions of suffering and difficulty in your book. In fact, your attention to literary craft means that you are able to pull us into some really difficult stuff and hold our hands and give it breath. And I was not talking about you when I said people don't pay attention to writing craft. I was like, this book is extraordinary. These are two of the best books, I just want to say, that I've read, like books by academics that I have read in recent years. They're both amazing. Anyway, I think there are going to just be, I'm sure you're starting to hear from people who are talking about their family's experiences in relation to what you've been talking about. And I don't know if I'm allowed to, Pranav, ask questions now yet to my fellow panelists.
Maybe let's...
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to hold that one to what people are saying about who they would like you to talk to.
I mean, it is interesting the way that the narratives come out, right, from both of you. So maybe I want to open the floor to all of you. I'm going to pull this mic. Can I pull this mic? Maybe I'll just, I can do it. Okay, I'm going to pass the mic to someone who would like, we will pass a different mic. Okay, great. Who would like to ask a question or make a comment? Yeah.
Hi. Oh, God, that's loud. So my quick comment is that I've not read your book. It sounds fantastic. I really look forward to it. But I have read Danilyn's, and I 100% agree that it's a very unusual crossover academic, also memoir book. And you kind of seeded the question of, like, I'd love to talk about how you, both of you, pulled that off, because it's really rare to see it done well, and it's done so well in the way you managed to knit together theory and memoir, and yeah, and it doesn't feel clunky. The two things really fed each other. So any words of wisdom you have on that, both of you? Thank you.
Well, you know, my three previous books on Biak, I'm the world expert on a small island off of New Guinea, and at one point I looked at the royalties and they were negative because some library had sent one of the hardcovers back. So I'm not what you call like a good bet market-wise for books. But, you know, I think for this book it was just because all of, you know, Millie was born in 2000, her father died in 2003, you know, it's like I've had this story in me for a long time, and it started just coming out, like when I was teaching theory classes, I couldn't help but want to talk about Millie, you know, and then I came to Santa Cruz, which is this fantastic place that licenses you to do all kinds of new sorts of things, so I started doing just some writing practice, just kind of for fun. And then she started appearing in some of the papers I'd written. And I thought, okay, like all of my books have been written in this really lazy way. Like I write a bunch of essays, I publish them, then I like smash them together and try to like, you know, open up the seams on the edges so they kind of fit together, right? I thought I could do that with this book. Absolutely not. It was like a long struggle to find the structure that would work between the memoir and recognizing and kind of owning up to the fact, actually, I have to tell the story from beginning to end. Everything I've always written is all like an essay. It goes in a circle, then you're in the next circle. No, I had to go beginning to end, it had to have an arc, but then also how to fit in the things that I wanted to say that I'd learned from the personal experience. I didn't want it just to be a personal book, right? So, yeah, part of the trick with that is just I've been writing with non-academic writers. Like my writing practice group morphed into a feedback class with a bunch of just women who are not academics mostly, who are writing memoirs, 1,600 words every week. And it was great because I'm like, oh, okay, this is like this beautiful paragraph on Derrida or Karen or River Barad, right? And they'd be like, this is so incredibly boring. I don't understand a word of this, and that was just a really great discipline. So yeah, it was hard work to figure out the structure and then just going back through every single word just to make sure that people who are not already committed to wanting to read it will want to read it. So, yeah, I don't know about, yeah.
Well, I often take notes when I'm playing a game. When I begin a game that I think I might want to write about, I start a note document about it. And usually those documents are meant to be mined, right? I'm going to find a little telling moment from the gameplay that will make my thesis in the essay I'm writing, more readily apparent or something like that. And then for this book, I actually got asked, can you write a book about just one game? Because they were starting this series, Replay, where each would be about one game. And I originally pitched them on Dungeons and Dragons because that's a game that's been with me since the early 1980s, and I felt I had a lot to say about it. And then at that moment, in sort of the late 2020, I realized it wasn't a game that was alive for me in nearly the same way as Animal Crossing was. And so then the Animal Crossing notes document became something that I really got to narrate as a whole almost, rather than just make my little magpie pickings from. And so I guess, for me, it was the first experience trying to write anything memoir-ish or anything like that. But it was a really rewarding form of writing that I hope someday I can come back to. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions?
Okay, to be fair, that's my husband up there. So, I'm the Jen that he talks about in the book. But I was wondering if you could talk about, Noah, your experience with writing about disability and write about especially disabled parenting, because before this book came out, most of your books, all of your books, have been more about the software side, the thinking through the mechanics of games and things like that. This is the first book that you've written that's been deeply personal, and it's about a very personal subject that you'd not disclosed before. So I was wondering if you could talk about your journey. They're actually talking to kind of outing yourself as a disabled parent.
Yeah, I guess as an academic who thought, I no longer think, but thought at some point I might need to change institutions or something like that, I was very cagey about my limitations, and I did everything to try to mask them. And certainly anything that would be in print that might be available to colleagues at other institutions, it was not going to be a topic. And so I think what happened before writing this book was coming to the realization that that I couldn't pretend to be other than I was. It was not supportable as a pretense, and that was really freeing. That at that point, to be able to say, I need to pace myself, and so, because of this evening, I will be resting much of the rest of this week, yeah, I guess, yeah, it was in part the writing the book and the book needing to have my presence in it that drove it, but it was in part just life changing to the point where I wanted to feel honest in the book. Yeah.
Can I just shout?
I will shout.
I'm curious, in your case, Danilyn, how your son views all of this, and in your case, how your kids do. And I'm speaking as the sister of somebody who's very much like Millie. So.
Yeah. Well, Ralph is definitely a character throughout the book. And, you know, when I finished what I felt like was getting pretty close to the final draft, I tried to share it with everyone who was in the book, who was named, which was really nice because I was able to get back in touch with a bunch of Millie's caregivers who I hadn't been in touch with for a while. And I also gave it to Ralph to read. And he told me he read it, and he's like, it's fine. I actually think he didn't read it because he recently told me, I finally read your book and it made me cry. You know? So he sort of lied about it. But yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, there is something really, I mean, anthropologists think a lot about the ethics of, you know, plumbing other people's lives for academic, you know, purposes, right? And you definitely feel the sort of complications of that when you're plumbing your own children's lives, you know? I felt like it was really important to talk to Ralph about the project. In the end, he really liked the book. He really, really enjoyed like the passages about when he was very young and this whole period when his father died. You know, he found it just being, it started some conversations between the two of us, which I think were really, you know, useful. We're extremely close. You know, we are the two talkers in the family. My attitude towards parenting is I kind of treat everyone as if they're my age, whether they're 90 or they're 3. So it was a very kind of egalitarian household in that way. I've always talked to Ralph a lot about things. And, you know, it was just, I think with the book, it was good to have a chance to talk to him. Now, when I talked about like what impact did having Millie have on you, he's basically like, I would be a lot less interesting. And I think that's probably true. You know, if the things that had happened in our life had not happened, he'd be a much less interesting person. And so I think that's kind of indisputable. Yeah.
Yeah, Zoe was trepidatious at first. She was like, so you're going to immortalize my fights with my brother from when I was 10. But she read the parts that were about her, and I read to Max the parts that were about him. And Max thought that I got some things wrong, which I, you know, tried to address. But they both, I think, ended up feeling comfortable being characters in this narrative. Hopefully they'll continue to feel that way. Yeah.
Can I tell you a joke about this? Recently I found out Thomas stole that story about the watch for a short story he wrote. So it was a good thing we wrote it down because, yeah, he's taking back his own stories to put them in stuff he's writing.
You invented the story. Okay, so we have time maybe for one more question. Did you want to say something, Donna?
I'm going to ask Danilyn a question.
Okay, so yeah, that's what I was going to say. Audience, and then you two fight for who asks the final question. Megan's looking like, I can't do that. Yeah, okay, then Donna. All right, so, yes. Are you sure? Okay.
Thank you for this. This is really great. I guess I'm just wondering, I'm currently on sabbatical and trying to write my first book, so I'm sort of feeling like, oh, this is like your 6th book, and this is your 5th book, and I guess I'm just wondering how we can really honor this work that we're doing and also make space for the fact that a lot of disabled parents and parents of children with significant disabilities have very much struggled to keep research agendas going and to be really
active and don't really have a space where you can say that, right? You can't say in a job interview, well, you know, my gastrointestinal system or my anxiety has been off the rails, so this is why I did not finish that book. So I guess I'm just kind of wondering your thoughts on some of this and how we can make space for a wide array of productivity expectations.
Yeah, I can talk. Sure. Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
I mean, so thank you for that question and comment, Amy. It's really complex in disability and disability ally community. I think and also to just name that sometimes those of us who live in these complicated body minds, we're just slower. And so our voices are actually heard sometimes less often. One thing, you know, in anthropology, where Danilyn and I have our professional life, we have a disability research interest group where everyone there is working on research that is somehow from a disability anthropology perspective or related to disability. But in addition, we have spaces that are for anthropologists with disabilities, and those are spaces that are really marked to, you know, make sure that we have places to talk about that and to uplift each other's work. And I know Danilyn was a part of a book event. They had tote bags. It was a fancy book event at the last AAA, which was a beautiful mix of people who are in proximity to disability, people living with disability. I'm going to hand this right over to you.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, that's actually super important. I think, you know, part of my story is like I've been very privileged. I had really, really good support from my extended family. I've had fantastic, skilled, professional care workers to be part of my life for a very long time. You know, I never could have done any kind of scholarship, I think, without that. And I think that has to be admitted. There are real differences in how you inhabit disability or proximity to disability, depending on class, privilege, all of those things. At the same time, I also feel like this is one of these situations in which the entire kind of expectation structure of academia is really problematic for many people for many reasons. And I think it's really important for people who are in a position of power or authority to begin kind of to think about, like, how do we think about tenure? How do we think about expectations? I've been really bothered in anthropology, like the 2 books to tenure, there are places that are doing that. You know, it's just craziness. I think all of us need to recognize that we're all living, you know, time, space, it's all loopy and weird, but there's not like 4 parallel tracks where you're living your personal life and you're living your academic life and you're living your activist life and you're living whatever life, right? You know, that we really have to recognize that we need to create livable lives for people who want to do this kind of work. In terms of, for me, I was like totally gonna go back and live in Indonesia for 2 years at some point. And that wasn't going to happen, you know, and I was even kind of involved in projects where I was supposed to be writing a very different kind of book than I ended up writing at various points. So, and just had to sort of, in some ways, come to terms with the fact that I've just done a lot less original research over the course of my career than I might like to. I spent a lot more time reading and commenting on other people's work, but that's okay. That's actually a valid way to be in the world. So yeah, it's a really important question. I think finding allies is incredibly important, and that's one of the beautiful things about what's been happening within anthropology.
I think my experience would have been very different if I'd begun this process disabled. I was able to, you know, build a professional network by doing things like going to conferences that I don't do anymore. And I was able to, you know, do a lot of my early writing and so on before this became an issue. Now the fact that I do anything is thanks to Jen, and what I do is definitely much less. On the other hand, I think there are some ways of making less work this book is 40,000 words. My previous work was 125,000 words. I think actually 40,000 words is better, you know? Having a limited energy envelope sucks, but I think sometimes it's helped me make better choices instead of saying yes to everything. Yeah.
Okay, Donna? Oh, Lori, do you want to?
Okay, but yeah, it's sort of an anthropological question and an authoring question, and it also, I think, addresses some of how you, Donna, responded to Danilyn's work, in that an author is usually, you know, writing from their perspective, and the difficulty for those of us who want to write about our our proximity to disability is just, you know, the anthropological difficulty of writing about somebody that you can't get inside, right? But I do feel like this amazing pairing that you've created for this evening is sort of, and with your other comments, addressing this combination relation that you're both exemplifying in you know, sort of opposite ways between, and that opens up, I think, for those of us who've been trying to write and think about these relationships in this hugely permissive way. And so again, it's not really a question, but I think it's a real appreciation. I did read your book and I was hugely moved by it. I haven't yet read yours, Noah, but I really, really want to. And I just feel like this conversation, and again, Donna, your way of thinking these combo relations opens up a lot of possibility for really, I think, you know, huge reserves of emotion and empathy that I feel just you being able to answer, asking questions. Anyway, it's an appreciation.
Well, that's a great place to end. So let's all express our appreciation to the four of you. Thank you so much. Yeah, but you're going to do that. Do you? This was highly scripted, as you see.
Yes, and I've dreamed about this for this specific moment. This is my Oprah moment. We have free copies of both books. And you get a book, and you get a book. So I don't know if we actually have one per customer. So if you have one, obviously don't take the one that you have. Graduate students that are here, y'all get to the front of the line. But please, this is the final event for the MRPI here at UCSC, and so please take these and read them in good company and good health. And yeah.